So before I uh, actually install this on a server and then we SSH in, what I wanted to do was go through how you actually create a USB disk that you can then use to install Fedora Core 22 on another machine. So just to walk you through the entire step, the first thing I did was I went to Google, because I don't exactly remember the process myself, and I said create USB boot disk form ISO OSX. What I meant was create USB disk from ISO OSX. Obviously Google is a lot smarter than I am. So the first link that came up was a link from Ubuntu. Actually, kudos to Ubuntu. I got to throw a shout out to them. They're actually a really great operating system, both on the desktop and on the server. In fact, I think from a desktop perspective, they're one of the best operating systems out there if you want to run Linux on your desktop. I'm not a Linux desktop kind of guy. I'm a Linux server kind of guy. I think Linux really shines at the server. I think the desktop, it's got a long way to go. But as far as a desktop operating system goes, Ubuntu's pretty up there. They have a lot of great features, a really great, well-supported product with a fantastic community of people who support it, and thus, as you can tell, even Google recognizes that they probably have the best answer to the question I'm looking for, which is how do I go about creating a USB image from a disk. So I click on that link. Again, good documentation, well formatted, and a lot of support out there from users if you run into any problems. So if you're new to Linux, Ubuntu might be the way to go. The reason I use Fedora Core is for a couple of reasons, namely because I'm an old Red Hat dog. I've been using Fedora Core for a long time, and I'm just used to it. I'm used to the way the operating system runs and works, and I feel comfortable with it. So there's so many distros out there. You got to find the one that you're comfortable with. I happen to be comfortable with Fedora Core. But having said all that, I'm going to follow the instructions listed at Ubuntu. So it says download Ubuntu desktop. I've actually already downloaded Fedora Core, the server. It's here in my downloads folder. There's the image. We used it in the last video. And I'm going to open up a terminal application. You can go to Applications, Utility, or just go to Spotlight here and type the word terminal, hit enter. I already had a terminal open here, so I'm going to just get myself a little better oriented with this documentation here. Let's move this guy here, and we're set to go. So it says open the terminal, application, utility, query, terminal, and spotlight. Convert the ISO file to an IMG using the convert option HDUtil, and it gives me an example of it. The reason I need to do that is because in Macland, that's the image format that the disk utility application, which is basically it does, you know, disk partitions, formatting, erasing, deleting, all that stuff. That's the way the disk utility program works. So we're going to go to my downloads. I've got a lot of junk in my downloads, and let's see, where is this? There it is, Fedora Server ISO. And so we're going to basically do HDUtil minus format UDRW minus O, and the output is going to be well, let's just call it the same thing, Fedora Core Server, except we're going to change the file type to IMG, and the input file is going to be the Fedora Core ISO file. Now it does say there, note, OSX tends to put the DMG ending on the output file automatically. We'll see if it does that or not. So we hit enter, and I already got an error. What did I do wrong? I forgot to tell it what I was trying to do. So the full command is HDUtil convert, and now it begins creating that file. And that was pretty fast. So it did actually add, probably easier to fix here. I called it image, and what it wanted to do was add the DMG file to the end of that. So I'm just going to fix it here in my GUI interface. So once we've done that, it says run disk-util -list. So let's see what disk-util minus list gives us. Insert your flash drive and run disk-util. Now I have already my flash drive installed. In fact, it's right here under disk 1. So disk 0 is actually my Macintosh disk here. And basically, as you can see, I have a Macintosh HD with 499 gigabytes of SSD flash drive. There is a boot recovery partition there as well. There's the EFI. And this disk 1 is actually the disk that I'm going to be writing this this image to. So once I do that, again, determine the device node assigned to your flash media. In this case, we know it's disk 1. Now it says you're going to unmount that disk, right? So we're going to use disk utility unmount disk, and we're going to give it that information. So let's try that. Disk util unmount disk dev disk 1. And let's see what happens. Unmount of the volume on disk 1 was successful. Now basically it's telling us we're going to take the image file, okay, in this case the DMG file, and we're going to write it to that disk. So let's go ahead and do sudo dd. Remember when I was telling you in the old video that you want to create a user for yourself so that you're not running as root. Here's a perfect example where I'm going to use the sudo command, which do as super user basically, or super user do, the dd command. And Ubuntu does everything like this. So does Fedora Core does this. All Unix and operating systems and Linux operating systems and many other operating systems support this, where you don't log in as the root user. You just don't. It's not a good idea for many reasons. You log in as a user who then has administrative privileges, either through wheel or through some other mechanism, to run functions that are assigned to the root. So in this case we're going to use sudo being super user do. The command is dd. The input file for this command in this case is Fedora Core DMG, and the output file is going to be dev, in this case disk 1, and we're going to do byte size equal to 1 megabyte byte sizes. So once we do that, we hit enter. It's going to ask me for my super user secret super user password, and I'm going to be putting in my own password. In this case, if somebody walked in over my shoulder, if there was a keylogger installed on this machine for some reason, by accident or by some hack, this password, the root password, wouldn't be exposed. Only my password would be exposed. I hit enter, and now it's going to take that image and it's going to write it to the file. Once that's done, I'm going to have a USB disk that I can now use to install my applications. There's really nothing much after this. It's just going to return me to the prompt once the disk is done. From there, I'm going to take that USB, I'm going to plug it into my actual piece of hardware that I'm going to install this on, and start it up from there. And from this part, you can just follow the steps in Fedora Core 22 in